This video is the start to finish process of making a custom order. I always start with designing, and everyone always gets 3 choices for a design for the cover. So this is me making some designs in Illustrator. Once I have a finished design, people can choose one, and then I can make some minor adjustments afterwards to make it perfect. I have this tiny little screen printing screen, and my idea for this was to make a very small pattern of my logo because I need to start making some test prints for custom orders and also for myself to try different color combinations, because so far I've just been kind of doing things at random and that doesn't always turn out very well. So I'm gonna apply the emulsion on this and let that dry, and then tomorrow we can expose it and make some test prints. This is actually my first time making such a small screen, so you'll see me fumble around a little bit with the emulsion and like how to get it into the frame properly, because I don't actually have a scraper small enough for a tiny frame like this, but I made it work. Once the emulsion is applied, I have to let it dry for long enough to become hard, and that usually takes about, at least a couple of hours. Here I'm designing the pattern that I'm going to be printing for my test prints, and then I always cut it out with a Cricut because the vinyl, I find, is very effective at blocking the light when exposing for the pattern. Once the pattern's been exposed, I just rinse it out and that's it. I made the screen to create the test pattern with, so that I can make the little samples of color. And I just mixed an orange paint that matches the color on the cover of one of my custom orders, and then I cut out these little test strips of the book cloth to try and create a good sample out of them. So let's get started. I'm just using these leftover boards, to spread the paint right now because I don't know where my tiny paint scraper is. So we're improvising. This is obviously not how I would do it for the final result, but it's good enough for a little test print. And then there's one final color that I want to try. And tomorrow I have one more color coming in that I also want to give a try, which is a slightly darker orange. So yeah, now all we're waiting for is the slightly darker orange color, and then we're all set for samples. And the reason I'm making these samples is so that I can then see how the titles will contrast with this, because the titles might become really hard to read if there's too much contrast between the paint and the background color. I actually forgot to film the process of checking the titles against the colors. I just sent them into the client and they picked their colors that they liked the best. and that's what I'm printing right now. So we're gonna have blue on blue, and I'm actually printing a couple of extra book cloths for myself because this is a pattern that I use myself as well, and I really like blue, so I'm making a little bit extra for myself. Now we get to the actual binding of the book, and you'll see me struggling to get this cover off a little bit because I'm trying to be really careful because this is the only copy of this book that I have, and the author signed it, so I have to be very careful that everything is perfect, which is terrifying, but I managed. Here I'm just fiddling a little bit with my Cricut book that I use for reading the vinyl, just to make sure that I get a clean tear of the cover so that I don't damage any of the paper. I've decided to go for a bit of a galaxy effect for the edges, and I do that by using a sponge, and then I sponge on different colors. In this case I do blue, white, and a little bit of black to create kind of a nebulous effect. Now I've moved on to the notebook that I'm making because part of my offering is when I take the covers off a book, I turn those covers into a notebook using the same book cloth that goes on the book and the original cover of the book. So now that the book's been decovered, I can turn the cover into a nice little notebook. I make these notebooks out of ready-made book blocks that are locally produced here, and then I apply a thin board to create like the front and the back cover, and then the spine gets covered into a strip of book cloth, which is then marked exactly to where I want to put the cover. And for the books that I sell, I usually don't include the back cover, but for these custom orders I do because I think it's cool to see the exact book that you gave to me come back to you as a notebook. So for this particular custom order, both the front and the back covers were used. When I have a regular book that I rebind, often the covers aren't in a great shape and they're covered in like stickers and stuff, so the back cover is usually not the best. Once both the front and the back covers are glued down, I then let the book dry overnight in the press before I cut the size on my cutting machine. Now, this is very obviously the bad side of my workspace because my workspace doubles as like a woodworking shop, and like all of our basement stuff is basically in my workshop. So apologies for the mess. I just realized that I also forgot to film the actual covering of the book cloth onto the cover, so here we immediately jump to applying the vinyl, which, yeah, is a bit of a pity, but next time I'll do better, okay guys? Now sometimes the vinyl sticks a little bit to the covering plastic, so I have to apply heat again, and if that still doesn't work, I always choose to switch over to my smaller iron, because that way I can apply pressure to exactly where it's still sticking, and that seems to always work out well. And so here you'll see me do a final pass before it's completely done. To glue in the book block into the cover, I always position the book block into the book, and then I use little pieces of board weights to keep everything in place before I glue the end papers and close everything like this. And then once one side is fixed, I can do the other side without worrying about the book block moving around on me. The annoying thing about bookbinding is that this is actually the step where things go wrong the most often. Because if you glue in your book block like crookedly, then that kind of ruins the functioning of the whole book. So it's very unfortunate that most often this is where the final step is where it goes wrong. Once everything is glued, I let it dry overnight in the press, and then the final step is applying the titles onto the spine.